First reading today is from the Wisdom of Solomon. God did not make death, and he does not delight in the death of the living. For he created all things so that they might exist. The generative forces of the world are wholesome, and there is no destructive poison in them. And the dominion of Hades is not on earth. For righteousness is immortal. God created us for incorruption and made us in the image of his own eternity. But through the devil's envy, death entered the world, and those who belong to his company experience it. The word of the Lord. For the second reading from Lamentations, please read together. This I call to mind, and therefore I have hope. The steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. His mercies never come to an end. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. The Lord is my portion, says my soul. Therefore I will hope in him. The Lord is good to those who wait for him, to the soul that seeks him. It is good that one should wait quietly for the salvation of the Lord. It is good for one to bear the yoke in youth, to sit alone in silence when the Lord has imposed it, to put one's mouth to the dust. There may yet be hope, to give one's cheek to the smiter and be filled with insults. For the Lord will not reject forever. Although he causes grief, he will have compassion according to the abundance of his steadfast love. For he does not willingly afflict or grieve anyone. And the final reading today is from 2 Corinthians. As you excel in everything, in faith, in speech, in knowledge, in utmost eagerness, and in our love for you, so we want you to excel also in this generous undertaking. I do not say this as a command, but I am testing the genuineness of your love against the earnestness of others. For you know the generous act of our Lord Jesus Christ, that though he was rich, yet for your sakes he became poor, so that by his poverty you might become rich. And in this matter I am giving my advice. It is appropriate for you who began last year not only to do something, but even to desire to do something. Now finish doing it, so that your eagerness may be matched by completing it according to your means. For if the eagerness is there, the gift is acceptable according to what one has, not according to what one does not have. I do not mean that there should be relief for others and pressure on you, but it is a question of a fair balance between your present abundance and their need, so that their abundance may be for your need, in order that there may be a fair balance. As it is written, the one who had much did not have too much, and the one who had little did not have too little. The word of the Lord.
The Holy Gospel of our Lord Jesus Christ according to Mark. Glory to you, Lord Christ. When Jesus crossed again in the boat to the other side, a great crowd gathered around him, and he was by the sea. Then one of the leaders of the synagogue, named Jairus, came, and when he saw him, fell at his feet and begged him repeatedly, "My little daughter is at the point of death. Come and lay your hands on her, so that she may be well and live." So he went with him, and a large crowd followed him and pressed in on him. Now there was a woman who had been suffering from hemorrhages for 12 years. She had endured much under many physicians, and had spent all that she had, and she was no better, but rather grew worse. She had heard about Jesus and came up behind him in the crowd and touched his clothes, for she said, "If I but touch his clothes, I will be made well." Immediately her hemorrhage stopped, and she felt in her body that she was healed of her disease. Immediately aware that power had gone forth from him, Jesus turned about in the crowd and said, "Who touched my clothes?" And his disciples said to him, "You see the crowd pressing in on you. How can you say, 'Who touched me?'" He looked all around to see who had done it. But the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came in fear and trembling, fell down before him, and told him the whole truth. He said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your disease." While he was still speaking, some people came from the leader's house to say, "Your daughter is dead. Why trouble the teacher any further?" But overhearing what they said, Jesus said to the leader of the synagogue, "Do not fear, only believe." He allowed no one to follow him except Peter, James, and John, the brother of James. When they came to the house of the leader of the synagogue, he saw a commotion, people weeping and wailing loudly. When he had entered, he said to them, "Why do you make a commotion and weep? The child is not dead, but sleeping." And they laughed at him. Then he put them all outside. He took the child's father and mother and those who were with him and went in where the child was. He took her by the hand and said to her, "Talitha kum," which means, "Little girl, get up." And immediately the girl got up and began to walk about. She was 12 years of age. At this, they were overcome with amazement. He strictly ordered them that no one should know this, and told them to give her something to eat.
Cuando Jesús regresó en la barca al otro lado del lago, se le reunió mucha gente y él se quedó en la orilla. En esto llegó uno de los jefes de la sinagoga, llamado Jairo, y al ver a Jesús se echó a sus pies y le rogó mucho, diciéndole: "Mi hija se está muriendo, ven a poner tus manos sobre ella para que sane y viva." Jesús fue con él, y mucha gente lo acompañó, apretujándose a su alrededor. Entre la multitud había una mujer que desde hacía 12 años estaba enferma, con derrames de sangre. Había sufrido mucho a manos de muchos médicos y había gastado todo lo que tenía, sin que le hubiera servido de nada. Al contrario, iba de mal en peor. Cuando oyó hablar de Jesús, esta mujer se le acercó por detrás, entre la gente, y le tocó la capa, porque pensaba, tan solo con que llegó a tocar la capa, quedaré sana. Al momento el derrame de sangre se detuvo, y sintió en el cuerpo que ya estaba curada de su enfermedad. Jesús, dándose cuenta de que había salido poder de él, se volvió a mirar a la gente y preguntó: "¿Quién me ha tocado la ropa?" Sus discípulos le dijeron: "¿Ves que la gente se oprime por todos lados y preguntas: '¿Quién me ha tocado?'" Pero Jesús seguía mirando a su alrededor para ver quién lo había tocado. Entonces la mujer, temblando de miedo y sabiendo lo que había pasado, se arrodilló delante de él y le contó toda la verdad. Jesús le dijo: "Hija, por tu fe has sido sanada. Vete tranquila y curada ya de tu enfermedad." Todavía estaba hablando Jesús cuando llegaron unos de la casa del jefe de la sinagoga a decirle al padre del niño: "Tu hija ha muerto. ¿Para qué molestas más al maestro?" Pero Jesús, sin hacer caso de él, le dijo al jefe de la sinagoga: "No tengas miedo, cree solamente." Y no dejó que lo acompañaran más que Pedro, Santiago y Juan, el hermano de Santiago. Al llegar a la casa del jefe de la sinagoga y ver al alboroto y la gente que lloraba y gritaba, entró y les dijo: "¿Por qué hacen tanto ruido y lloran de esa manera? La niña no está muerta, sino dormida." La gente se rió de Jesús, pero él los hizo salir a todos. Y tomando al padre, a la madre, a los que lo acompañaban, entró a donde estaba la niña. La tomó de la mano y le dijo: "Talitha kum", que significa muchacha. Allí te digo, levántate. Al momento la muchacha, que tenía 12 años, se levantó y echó a andar. Y la gente se quedó muy admirada. Pero Jesús ordenó que no se contaran a nadie. Y luego mandó a ir de comer al niño. Evangelio del Señor.
Please be seated. After the 9 o'clock service this morning, it was suggested that I let you know that I'm a city girl from San Francisco now, and the story I'm about to tell you will make a little more sense, I think. Last Wednesday night, I had a bit of an adventure in my bathroom. I'd stayed up late studying, and it was near midnight when I finally decided to take a shower and go to bed. In the process, I discovered a scorpion, pretty big one, lodged between the shower curtain and the liner right at about eye level. To say that I was startled would be putting it mildly. And after my heart rate returned to some semblance of normal, I knocked on my neighbor Walter's door, somebody I really didn't know well at all. I woke him out of a sound sleep, and in my broken Spanish asked him for help. What ensued was a comedy not unlike an I Love Lucy episode. Walter brought a can of bug spray, but upon seeing the size of the scorpion, decided that a more successful approach would be to crush the scorpion between two books. Now, the only two hardbound books that I had in my room were the Bible and the Book of Common Prayer. And Walter politely refused to use them to do the deed. Instead, he used two paperback books, one of which was the Insider's Guide to San Miguel that Kathy Gregg loaned me. And please don't tell her that we used it for that. And the other one was a book on Panama that I'm reading. This approach was quite successful, and thanks to Walter, I was able to sleep that night. All of this is a lighthearted example of one of the themes of this week's lectionary, and that is the blessing of simple presence, being there for each other, especially when life goes sideways. There are experiences in life that take us to the edge of our ability to cope. And I imagine everyone here has a story or two or three to tell. The death of someone you love, a broken relationship, a heartbreaking diagnosis, can bring us to a place where our faith seems inadequate and God feels very far away. And these are the kind of experiences that we read in today's gospel. It's the story of people who were experiencing real life. People very much like you and me, who were dealing with situations that they tried to handle on their own until they realized they couldn't. Jesus crossed the Sea of Galilee and found himself surrounded by a large crowd of people, pressing in on all sides to catch a glimpse of the man they had heard some pretty crazy stories about. Throughout the Gospel of Mark, Jesus orders that these miracles be kept a secret, but even he couldn't control the media. I imagine the scene might have been similar to El Dios de los Locos, without the aliens and Porky Pigs. In the midst of this chaos, two people from very different worlds approached Jesus in two very different ways. Jairus was a man of prominence in his community. As the leader of the synagogue, he was used to a certain level of privilege and power. And he was not accustomed to asking for assistance, especially from a homeless stranger. But his daughter was dying, and we can assume that she received the best available care from physicians of those days, but to no avail. He was at the end of his rope. He had undoubtedly heard stories of healings that Jesus had provided, and at that time he was willing to lower himself in the eyes of his community to beg for a miracle. Jairus fell at the feet of Jesus and pled for the life of his daughter, asking Jesus to lay his hands on her to simply touch her and make her well. Now, the other person in the story is a woman who had suffered from hemorrhages for many years. In the culture of her time, she was considered unclean, untouchable, an outcast. She couldn't even go to the synagogue to worship, was not allowed. And she doesn't even have a name. It seems she had money at one time because the gospel reports that she'd been under the care of many physicians but continued to decline. So she lost everything. This woman had also heard of Jesus' reputation, and for whatever reason, she believed in his ability to heal her. Given her complete lack of cultural and social status, the woman did not dare ask Jesus directly for healing as Jairus had been able to do. She had to figure out a way to get what she needed in a different way. She believed that simply touching his clothing would make her well, and she somehow made her way through the crowd to be near him. When she was finally close enough, she reached out, touched his cloak, and was immediately healed. Only then was she able to talk to Jesus directly and told him the truth of the audacity of her faith, a faith that Jesus confirmed is what healed her. In the midst of this encounter, Jesus overheard people telling Jairus that his daughter had died and it was really too late to do anything about it. Jesus responded by speaking to Jairus directly. Remember, Jairus was the leader of the synagogue. And yet Jesus says, "Do not fear, only believe." He then walked to Jairus' home, turned the household upside down by asserting that the child was not dead, but sleeping. The absurdity of his claim was not lost on the mourners, and they laughed through their tears. And I just wonder, what was Jairus thinking at that time? What was he thinking? After putting them all outside, I would love to have seen that. I mean, Jesus healed the girl in the presence of only her parents and the 3 disciples who joined him. And how does the healing occur? A simple touch. The presence of love itself. And this is a clue what we can do when all seems lost. When reason and logic fail us, when there's no way to make sense of what's happening, when the illusion of control vanishes. We can turn to the promise and reality of God's abiding presence and love as a source of healing and comfort. The miracle of true healing is as simple and profound as that. Sometimes it's manifested in ways we cannot begin to understand. I'm sure many of us have had an experience. Something wonderful happened, but we can't figure out how that occurred. But other times it's manifested by those who are willing to be present to our pain and ready to walk through our grief. We have seen this kind of grace in the recent tragedy in Charleston. And many of us have felt it in the most intimate moments when somebody has just wiped our brow or taken our hand. That is the gift of an incarnate God. One who isn't purely spiritual or ethereal, or as they say at my seminary, woo-woo. A God who lives in the reality of our daily lives. Jesus breathed and bled, laughed and cried. He cooked fish for his friends. He shook his head at their lack of understanding. And he empowered them for ministry beyond their wildest dreams. The incarnation is all around us. It's right here in this sanctuary. And we see it if we know to look for it. Think about the people who have helped you through a difficult time. Their support probably didn't involve supernatural powers or even deep pockets, as much as it involves simple presence, a warm hug, a kind word, maybe a nice meal. The world throws some pretty tough stuff our way, but the Incarnation assures us that we're not alone in our grief, even when it feels like it. We may be saying goodbye to one way of being, and we may never be the same again. But we can go on, knowing that life isn't over, it's just different. So it's important to remember that our own actions, the choices we make every day, can manifest the Incarnation when we understand that all that we have and all that we are is a gift from God. God works in and through us through the grief and heartbreak of this world to bring new life. When we find ourselves at the edge of our ability to cope, it's important to remember that we have a choice. We can give up, or we can turn our eyes to God, reaching out for love's presence in the midst of chaos. Big crowd by the Sea of Galilee. Such love may require the humility of Jairus, or the faith and perseverance of an unnamed woman, or the forgiveness shown by the AME Church in Charleston. It may come to us in the solitude of prayer, or the opportunity just to hold somebody's hand, or the smashing of 2 books. But it will always come. Amen.